So once they start, it's gonna happen.
Got to see your beautiful studio, Lillian. They're so nice. Yeah, I see up there.
Like a legendary studio space in there. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna sit up here with you. We're
Yes,
gonna
that's good.
almost be ready to go. And
Hi, my name is Topelmush. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Huh? Oh, it will. Okay. Ooh. It's all yours, yes.
we're feeling ready. Jonathan, do you have to give us a thumbs up or anything? We're good? Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for being here, both in person and online if you're watching live or later. I'm Jennifer Smith. I'm a Métis curator, arts administrator, and writer. And through my arts administrative work, I work for the National Indigenous Media Arts Coalition, more commonly known NIMAC. And through NIMAC, just to give you a little information about who we are, we're a fairly small organization that serves Indigenous artists working in media art, so things like film, video, digital art, digital installation. And we partnered with Urban Shaman to present Little Fires by Dan Cardinal McCartney, who we're all here to hear talk tonight. The exhibition came as part of this amazing partnership that Urban, agreed to do with NIMAC to have one of the people who've been part of our mentorship program have an exhibition every couple years in their Marvin Francis Gallery or the Media Art Gallery. And so it's been amazing to be able to share in this partnership and have the support of Urban. So I think I just also, as I'm talking about Urban Shaman, want to thank the team here who's been so wonderful in the amount of care that they give to both like I guess all of our stories, Indigenous artists, how much they care for art and are passionate about it. So just, want to say thank you to Debbie, Justin, Teo, and Jonathan. We're really lucky to have been able to work here with them. And so I'm, going to talk a little bit about the very briefly, but the mentorship program. So NIMAC holds a digital or I guess media art, not just digital, mentorship program every 2 years. And so it's almost been 3 years that Dan was part of the mentorship program with a mentor, Theo Cuthand. And this work was being worked on during that, which is kind of thrilling to think that 3 years later, we're able to exhibit it and really show what happened during the mentorship, but also, celebrate the amazing work that Dan is doing, be able to also have it in places outside of the cities that we live in or the towns that we live in. So, getting to have Dan here from Calgary is, I think, a really important part of that. Specifically thinking about NIMAC being a national organization that works with people, the word is national, but I call it more nation to nation organization that's working with people from so many different nations, and then, being able to make those connections across these extremely vast lands that we live on, and it's hard sometimes to connect in person. So this is a really exciting time to be able to do that. I think what I'd like to do is really leave this over to Dan to talk about his practice and introduce himself properly, or not me properly, that you get to introduce yourself is what I'm trying to say. But I just want to thank you all for being here. We'll do a bit of a Q&A after, so if you have questions, be ready. If not, I'll have some questions and be up here and you can hear Dan and I chat a little bit.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you so much, my captive audience members. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much to Jen from 9MAC. It's been such an incredible experience working with you as a curator. Nicole Kelly Westman, one of my mentors, always says a care-ator instead of a curator, and you are definitely a care-ator, and I really appreciate it. As a two-spirit, like Indigenous artist, I haven't always had the best experiences working with galleries and curators, so I really appreciate your care throughout this process. Not just with my story, but my family and my nation's story. I can't speak for my nation, but I really appreciate that you've shown. And also to the Urban Shaman team, like everybody's been so fantastic. And also Adrian, who wrote the essay. I met Adrian a couple of years ago at a conference, and they've been doing fantastic things. So I just want to say like a quick shout out to Adrian. It's been so lovely. So yeah, I feel really cared for through this process. So yeah, I just want to start off with that. And also to Theo for the mentorship that they provided me 3 years ago. I can't believe it's been 3 years. COVID did a number on us all, so I don't know what year it is anymore, but I really appreciate that. But really, I want to just say a quick shout out to my partner, Tony, who did all of the filming that you see of my hands. There's no way, just this image alone, could I have done that without her support. And currently she's at home we're both caregivers for my sister Carrie, who's also an artist. We're a family of wacky artists, and Tony's taking care of the home right now. So yeah, just want to say a quick shout out to her. So thank you. But yeah, talk more a bit about it. So for Little Fires, I'm just gonna go over kind of my background, my references and process. Whenever I like to listen to an artist talk, I wanna know what I'm getting into. I just don't like going in not knowing. Maybe it's a bit of my tism, but I just like to know what I'm gonna get into, right? So this is a picture of Fort Chip, Alberta. But just to introduce myself, Dan Cardinal McCartney, I go by he, him, they, them pronouns. I was born and raised in Fort McMurray, Alberta, and the Cree word means where the three rivers meet, the Athabasca, Snai, and Horse River. And my family has been living in Fort Chipewyan since time immemorial in northern Alberta, all across northern Alberta. So I am, it's kind of like in the north, we're also mixed together. So I'm at the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation, Mikshu Cree First Nation, and also Métis, and that's just on my mom's side. And then I'm German. My dad immigrated from Germany when he was 17. So just two very different kind of backgrounds, one from very colonizer background and from First Nations. So I just think it's important to acknowledge that I occupy that space of privilege in a lot of ways. And I'm a two-spirit trans artist, currently living, like Jen said, in Treaty 7, Okinsis, Calgary, and currently I'm the co-director of Stride Gallery, an artist-run center out there where we prioritize mainly BIPOC voices local to Calgary. So hi, Mel, if you're watching. She's currently Stride's co-director. She's from Winnipeg, so I thought worlds collide. And this is a picture of me and my two other siblings. Isaac's the one eating the apple, and I feel like they're kind of important characters to start to introduce to you all. So Isaac, he's always eating an apple, and you'll see in other photographs, he was obsessed. And I think that there's something about eating an apple. You'll notice in film, the villain is always eating the apple. Like it's from Shakespearean plays to Harry Potter, where Draco Malfoy is eating an apple. It pops up again and again and again. And I don't know why he was always eating it. And then that little one is Carrie, my sister, who's also the artist as well. And then there's me the day after Carrie was born, where I just started drawing, and that's where it all starts. So she's the fault for everything. Just joking, Carrie. So I'm from Fort McMurray, as I said, and when people think of Fort McMurray, they think like oil sands, and like they're not wrong. I mentioned yesterday the ratio to from men to women. It's 13 men to 1 woman, and it's man camp. So you can kind of see, like right there, that's an aerial shot of some of the man camps. So there's that kind of sense of danger that I had kind of growing up as a two-spirit, visibly Indigenous, very queer growing up in Fort McMurray, because people would come from all around the world, often Newfoundland, to go work at the oil sands, live away from their friends and family, these men, and they would be relatively close to the town sites. And then in the middle, you'll see the oil sands, And even Leonardo DiCaprio is like fighting against the oil sands. He went to Fort Chip and like met people from our community. It was super weird. But you can see that's an aerial shot. And then, so my family, yeah, has lived in Fort McMurray. And do you see Fort Chip all the way up there? Do you see that tiny little road that's kind of like a vein of a river? So that is quite literally a river. The only way you can get to Fort Chip in the winter is through the ice road. So you have to be like the ice road truckers that you'll see on HGTV or whatever. And then you can also fly up in this tiny little airplane that's a 10-seater, and I was in that airplane, and it's actually so terrifying. So that's kind of the only two ways that you can get there. But yeah, my family's been living in that area since time immemorial as well. But that's kind of like how a lot of folks see Fort McMurray, that it's very oil sands. But just growing up, this is kind of like more of the vibe that I kind of saw at Fort McMurray. Growing up in foster care, just being, it was a different experience being from around 6 months onwards, being taken away from my mom and being placed into foster care and going that back and forth. I'd say growing up, like, I wasn't super involved in, oh, Jen, would it be okay, just the tism again, if we turn off the audio from my video over there? Because I keep hearing my irritating voice. I'm like, good God, that's me again. Thank you. Sorry about that. I was like, what is it? It sounds like a mosquito to me. Thank you. But just growing up in Fort McMurray as a two-spirit person, it felt, again, very dangerous, but I'd say the queer community there is pretty resilient. We used to throw like Rocky Horror movie picture shows as a teenager, and it was like a close-knit group of people. But yeah, as a child, I found like a lot of refuge going into the forest, as we all have. And it felt just something about Fort McMurray. Whenever I try and explain it to people, there's one way in and there's one way out. And that highway has been called the highway of hell because it wasn't twinned. It was kind of like pretty much not a dirt road, but just people going like 160 an hour trying to get in and out. So it felt very like horror movie-esque, which I'll kind of like delve into a little bit later. But just like a little bit about my family, I always like to bring my relatives and my family into any space. So this is my granny, my cookum, Dan Cardinal, and her daughter, my Auntie Barb, Uncle Matthew, who is also a photographer, fine arts photographer in his own right. And then that tiny little cute one, I'm a little bit biased, is my mom, Sally Cardinal. So this was on the trap line in the 70s. So I'm the first generation in my family that didn't live on trapline, that lived in Fort McMurray off reserve as well. My family also lived on the Doghead Reserve in Fort Chip. And so just like as most Indigenous folks, we've been impacted by the residential school system. My family, relatives, my grandma, who's in this picture, and the older children in my family were sent to the residential schools since it opened in Fort Chipewyan, Holy Angels, which I'll show a little bit later, for like the 100-year history. So my ancestors, I'd say like 5 out of 7 of the first children are my direct ancestors. So not to go too much into foster care, but just realizing that it's like a larger extent than one person or one person's action. I think a lot of time people blame the mom too, and I just like want to acknowledge like the larger structural problems that has been going on. But yeah, I come from a long line of dancers, singers, beaters, artists. My grandpa was a violin fiddler player, and my auntie Shirley and my cousin are also dancers as well. So I come from like really artistic, very strange people who love astrology, numerology, and horror stories. So it's been a process reconnecting. So that's my grandma, Dan Cardinal, and then that's my sister in the middle. And they are such twins. Like, she was like, oh, great to meet you again, Dan. I haven't seen you since you were, oh my God, Carrie. And you could tell that they just really love each other. They have the same haircut almost. It was so sweet just seeing them reunited. So just to acknowledge like the reconnecting journey. I think a lot of people who get scooped, people always talk about the 60s scoop. I think there's a big thing about the millennial scoop that has happened as well. And I'm so glad that people are talking about it too. So I had the honor of going to Fort McMurray, curated by Jess Crochet. See, again, it's always the woman and the femmes doing the important work of curating, bring people home and doing this work. So, yeah, and it was such an important experience exhibiting work and having my granny, who hates leaving the house, she's like in her 80s, just coming up and sitting like front, right, and center for my artist talk. And I haven't seen her since I was like 4, just being like, oh my God, there she is. And then my auntie, who was live streaming on Facebook the entire time. So it was just like a very different experience. It just felt like such a gift to reconnect with them. And then you'll see on the far right, we have my cousin Maya, Kenny, my cousin Jeanette, my sister, and my partner Tony. And this was all taken in Fort McMurray about two years ago, so right after the mentorship program with NIMAC. So this was kind of like the catalyst of really returning home and getting to meet people again that I haven't met since I was a child. But it felt like such a surreal experience, and just like a really important one that has been really pivotal, because a lot of Two-Spirit people, as we try and reconnect, just because of all of the colonization, it's not always an easy adjustment, and family members are not always accepting. But I will say that my Auntie Shirley, when I first met her, she wore a beautiful jacket with, I think, rainbow fringe, and she sat right down and she was like, don't you worry about it. And I was like, oh, okay. And she was just like, the creator doesn't make any defects. I love you. And I was like, oh my God. And this was like just getting to meet her at the age of 23. And it was just really impactful to hear that as well. Because yeah, the stories aren't always positive. And just reconnecting with my family, there's so many gay people in my family anyways, so it just makes sense. Like sometimes it is just hereditary, and I love that. My little sister there, she's a very out and proud lesbian as well, so it's all there. So I'll just kind of go into like the process of kind of what is really driving this current project, Little Fires. As you can see, my brother, who sadly is heterosexual, he's not gay. He and I were obsessed with horror novels growing up. You'll see that with our long-term care foster father, William McCartney, that he was also obsessed with horror books. So we weren't allowed to touch the horror books, but I'd say as soon as I could start to read, I started reading Stephen King, Dean Koontz, even Margaret Atwood was a little scary, like all these white horror authors. I remember Margaret Atwood wrote about the Wendigo in one of her books. I can't remember the title, but I was like, what's that? And so I had a sense growing up that I was obviously Indigenous, but I remember them saying, like, my foster parents, I thought they said you're half Italian, but they said Indian. So for a while I thought it was Italian, but then I asked a few more questions and it was fine. But I was really confused. I was looking in the mirror. I was like, am I Italian? So it all made sense around the age of 7. But Isaac and I would just sneak to the basement. We're only about 18 months apart. And any activity we kind of did together, as you can tell. And we would just read and read and read all these horror novels. Because sometimes when it's -40 in Fort McMurray, you can't go outside. Like, you really should not go outside. So that's what we really did. And so this kind of blends into my love of horror and kind of what I'm referencing also in Little Fires. I was really obsessed with the movie Hereditary by Ari Aster. Even just the title, I thought, what is this? And so I went to the theater and I took my little sister, and by the end of it, she was crying and had to hold my hand, and I felt so bad because it actually truly is really scary. And you could see, do you see that figure kind of perched up on the ceiling? Like those small moments of terror that you don't really notice right away. And not to give away the plot of the movie, but it's about those family dynamics that rupture in disrupting that family core. And that's what I really love about horror movies. And growing up, I would just watch, besides reading horror, I would watch like Halloween and my foster family, they had 2 older sons. They all had children of their own, and I would be the babysitter. I was the oldest girl, and I would put on the horror movies. I did not care. I was like, let's go. So on Sunday morning, we would all watch horror movies. So it was like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, again, Halloween. I remember the Blair Witch Project. I really loved horror because for me, there was a sense of course, trauma, but also that when you're two-spirit in such a small town, because I was gay from the beginning, like I was just so visibly queer. I also cut off all my hair with my own scissors at the age of 7. Like I was, hello, like we are doing this. So for me, it was quite obvious. I didn't try to fit in for a couple of years there, but it was not, everybody, come on, like, yeah, like hello. And for me, horror was this place where everything really made sense. Like everything's fine in the beginning, like everyone's really happy, and then something happens. And there's that moment of tension and that feeling of you're gonna like come out to your family. There's that moment of tension. You're gonna exit your home and, oh, how are people gonna perceive you? There's that moment of tension for me that's really important and is also informing the work in Little Fires. And yeah, there she is. There's Toni Collette, poor Toni Collette. Just the idea that also there's things that are going on that are also not very much like discussed in the family, or when you go out to events, there's always stuff going on at home. And I would always have this sense as a foster kid that there was this other life that could have been, as cheesy as that sounds. There was this sadness and this grief, obviously, and just reconnecting with my mom and my family, it became more and more apparent that like Indigenous people, there's other folks talking about this too, that Indigenous people, the apocalypse is not coming. Like a lot of white people and scholars on TV, Leonardo DiCaprio, the apocalypse is coming. Well, for Indigenous people, it's been here for a really long time. So for me, I felt watching horror movies like this makes perfect sense. And also with different movies such as like The Body Snatchers or Children of the Corn, that kind of thing, that as Indigenous millennial scoop, like a person like myself, it's like the horror has already happened. We've already been snatched and apprehended. So for me, the horror genre felt like this really fertile ground to start having these conversations. And just in this, for Hereditary, like those, again, small moments of horror, I had no idea. Do you see those tiny little figures? Apparently those are naked people standing on the lawn staring at the house. I had no idea that that was like a very snap moment in the film. So again, it's that moment of tension that maybe not be so quite obvious as well. And I will say, again, my love of horror comes from a lot of the time, often racialized characters are killed off first, such as like Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis, Toni Collette. Often it's white women's emotions being displayed on screen. What I love about the horror genre is that it's expansive and it can confront people with that tension. And so I hope that there's going to be an Indigenous horror renaissance, and I think that there is, and it's really exciting. So, not to get too heavy, but I mean, that's also with horror movies. I feel like in the vein of already experiencing the apocalypse, as my family who's lives in Fort McMurray and northern Alberta since time immemorial, as I know that Winnipeg is also everyone's experiencing wildfires. For me, I was especially impacted in 2016 by the Fort McMurray wildfire that started at the Horse River. That's where we would all go have pallet fires and like just party right by the river. So it was very strange seeing that place where we would go in high school be the start of where the fire was. So this was in May 2016, and these are some shots that you can find online of what the sky looked like, people escaping town in their trucks. And I wasn't present there for the fire. My family moved 3 years earlier, me and my foster family, because my foster dad was always like, there's going to be a fire. We got to get out. We got to get out. He always had this sense like there's something coming. And I was like, okay, you're kind of like a prepper. Like, what are you doing? And he was never wrong. And he also he really was afraid of that one way in, one way out. And so the Fort McMurray fire, it very much gave that, it was terrible, just the evacuations, but not to go too much into that. For me, just going back and seeing the devastation after the fire, I, at the time, in 2018, just making a mess of the gallery. I haven't seen the fire and the aftermath of it until I went back, and this was after kind of my top surgery and starting testosterone. I didn't see the aftermath of the fire until I came back as not this new person, but just living this very different life. And it was so strange seeing everything so familiar and living my life that felt familiar to me, but not necessarily familiar to my surroundings, if that makes sense. So it was like I was getting reacquainted with the forest and all the land that I really, really loved and felt so connected to in this different mode, this like different energy that I was bringing. And so in terms of little fires, just thinking about how my foster dad, William McCartney, he recently passed away from Alzheimer's about 3 years ago. And he had this photo, this camera that he received from working at Syncrude for 35 years. For some reason, they gave him a camera, but he was never able to use it. So the camera that I used in Little Fires was actually his camera. So I just think about how all these intersections of the oil sands and the arts and modes of expression, like he's quite literally one of the few white cis straight guys I ever loved, and I don't think I ever will again. And to me, it's just such great gifts that he gave me, but also that complicated thing of like, yeah, he is like a white guy working at sites and actively participating in the destruction of my biological family. You know what I mean? It felt again that binary way of looking at it. Two things can be true at once. Sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 things can be true at once. And again, that's what I love about the horror movie genre, that there can be multiple plot lines kind of running through. So I had the amazing experience of going not only back to Fort McMurray after the fire. I was part of the residency program through Wood Buffalo in last year, actually. Like, time is just, I don't know what year it is anymore. And I haven't been back to Fort Chip since I was a baby. I was sent to live with family there for a couple of months as a baby, so I really don't remember any of it, obviously. But just going back and being really welcomed and embraced by Donna Abashan. She was working and is still working for Wood Buffalo, but she took me in like her res truck and just drove me around, and she was so good at connecting me with folks. And it was such a surreal experience going back and meeting like long lost cousins, people being like, "Who's your grandma?" And I'd be like, "Jeanette Cardinal." They're like, "Who's your great grandma?" And I'd be like, "Emily Cardinal." They'd be like, "Oh, we know Emily." And I was like, "Oh no," like just sassy. Apparently she was very sassy and liked to wear a lot of hats. And so it makes me think like how tiny Fort Chip is, but the history there is so rich. And it was really surreal going back. I wasn't like openly being like, "I'm two-spirit, like I'm queer." People really read me as like a young man, which was interesting. And they were like, "Oh, it's the young man who's returned home." And I'm like, "Oh my God, you're gonna make me cry." It was so sweet how people were just so warm and welcoming. So that was last summer. And just going to Fort Chip and just seeing where Donna took me and my long lost cousin Marlene to where the Fort Chip residential school was really impactful, as we all who are Indigenous have experienced that. Again, my family has been there for 100 years. And you'll see on like the top is where the residential school was and the priest quarters. And right here, which you'll see in Little Fires as well, is where the families of the children who were taken away, they would put up their teepees and their camps there and light fires every night so that their children knew that they were still there. Because there was this large chain link fence that was put up, but the kids could look out their windows and see their family every night. And I thought, damn, that's love. That's love, right? What I really not so secretly like is that about 10 years ago in the community, one night the residential school got burned down by an anonymous source. So nobody knew who burnt down the residential school. And they also burnt down the preschoolers. So I'm also thinking about how fire, as negative as the large man-made fire of the Fort McMurray one, sometimes fire can be really healing and really good. Not everybody agreed with those folks' decisions, but I'm kind of like, burn, baby, burn. Like, I love that. Like, burn it down. Like, just evil, terrible, terrible things happen there. And just the process of going to Fort Chip and meeting family, again, I cannot like understate it enough. The picture second from the right is my cousin Marlene. And just like my Auntie Shirley, she's a historian. She was the one that came to this artist talk that I gave there in a collage workshop. And again, she was like, who's your family? And I started telling her. She was like, oh my God, you're my cousin. And she gave me the biggest hug. And she was so warm. And she took me around the middle of the night. I gave her my phone number that day, and she calls me. She's like, I'm going to come pick you up. And I'm like, okay. And she drove me around all of the reserve and showed me where my family lived, because my family mostly lives in Fort McMurray now. Like, my granny hasn't been back to Fort Chip since like the 70s. She will not go on the airplane. She will only go on the ice road, which, like, I don't know which one I prefer. But she took me to all these sites, and she told me this story about our maternal ancestor, my great, great, great grandma. Everybody called her Big Mary. And the picture on the far right is the site where she built the trapper's cabin with her sons, and she was a Métis woman. And again, all of us being so mixed in the north, like, she's also the Métis side of my family. So she built that cabin, and she was really proud of that cabin. She had about 10 or 11 children, so she had a lot of kids, and she's pretty badass. And she would walk about 24 kilometers just to go fishing, where the Canada Parks people didn't know where she was. And so she built this cabin with her sons, and then this white trapper was like, this is my cabin. And he was like, you got to move out. So she took some kindling in the middle of the night, and she took some matches, and this is around the turn of the century, and while he was out, God knows where, probably getting drunk somewhere, she literally lit and burnt down that cabin in the middle of the night, because that's her cabin, that's her son's cabin, that's not his cabin. So I come from very powerful woman that if I met, I think I'd be really scared of, but like in a good way. And my immediate family's like that, my sister's like that. So again, like, just in that vein of like the horror movie genre of like, you're searching and you're finding. And I really, not in the slasher films, but like, yeah, those films where it's the woman who's like figuring it out, can outsmart the character, the evil character as well. And just, yeah, that's my great great grandpa, Maxime. That's one of our ancestors who kind of looks like my brother. It was really bizarre. And so just going to Fort Chip, that you can also see in Little Fires, is that the site of where controlled burns are happening. There was a big fire in Alley Bay there, but also that when I went, it was so bizarre just hearing like the old people at the only one restaurant there called like the Chip Restaurant, because Fort Chip, that they were like, have you seen the water? There is no water. The water has been lowest since like time immemorial in Fort Chip. So people couldn't take out their boats, and it was duck hunting season. So you could see that there's like these reeds that people haven't seen in a really long time, and the caribou are no longer coming through Fort Chip as well. So they've completely changed their mode of living in their life. But what I really liked about hearing from random conversations with older people at the restaurants, they were like, come here, I want to tell you a story. It was just so cool just hearing what they had to say. But apparently the caribou would go really close to where the parents would set up their camp for the night so that their children could see them. So I really love that the caribou and the parents were in the same area. And just returning home after the wildfires, like as much as like the devastation and destruction and the sadness and the grief, just talking to my Auntie Shirley, even in our first meeting, she said she really reminded me, like, despite everything, you know, she was like, we've been doing controlled burns for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. The forest is healing itself. Like, the forest is good without us. And I felt like that was a really good, humbling thing to hear from her. And it just, yeah, I really needed to hear that. And so there's some like fireweed on the left and like ferns growing back again. So the forest is healing. And the blueberries are coming out and they're so cute. So in terms of little fires, just giving all the context and background, I think for this film, this 3 sets of film, just working with Theo Cuthand for the NIMAC mentorship program, all of the things I just told you was after the program, but working with Theo and working with Jen and just hearing about just wonderful perspectives, it really became apparent, and I was really encouraged by Theo to think about going off of just like that one screen. So when you walk into the Marvin Francis Gallery, it's on the 3 walls. And I really wanted the viewer to be really immersed in the video, again, in that horror movie way where everything's surrounding you. Because when you go to Fort McMurray after the fire, you think it's like going to be a little bit of damage, but you can see like from left to right that it's just is so widespread. And I had to be evacuated from another fire during my residency last year because it was 14 kilometers, a little bit too close for comfort. And then so I left in the night, and then the next day we started evacuating. So again, that horror movie-esque of like, oh my God, we got to get out of here. So I had all of that in mind when Jen approached me with this project, and it was just all percolating. And I thought, like, what can I do that would feel right and feel correct? And originally I wanted to do Super 8 or just film, but my camera broke, as sometimes it just does. So luckily I did backup footage on my dad's camera, and that's all of the footage that you can see there. So some of the footage is of in Fort Chip and also in Fort McMurray, all on my dad's camera, which I really wanted in that square format. Just thinking about, like, as someone who's a millennial, kind of like that Instagram kind of vibe, but also thinking about the Super 8 films that I would really love to do. And there's just something about that square format that could be really up close and personal. As the traditional formats as well. And just thinking about that liminal space that you can occupy as a two-spirit trans person, I think for me, having the 3 screens as you walk in, and then that 4th space that you as the viewer, your body occupies, I really thought of that in-between space that I feel I occupy as a two-spirit person. And there's one way into the gallery and there's one way out, just like that horror movie. And just to bring back again that idea of collaboration, my partner Tony did a lot of the filming in our backyard of all the fire scenes, and I think there's something really special collaborating. I mean, she's French Acadian and Newfie, so she's like very, you know, she's a white lady, but I thought, okay, she's my partner. She's also a queer woman. There's something about the female gaze that felt really important to me as like a he/him transmasc lesbian that I really, really wanted. And you'll notice in the film that there's a lot of shots of just my hands. And that is just so gay to me. If you know, you know. And if you don't know, sorry, I'm not going to explain it. But it felt really important to have my partner have those fragmented shots of my body that felt very limited in a way that you don't have to reveal so much of yourself, that some things are just for you. And so just quickly to touch on like the Book of Dene with all of the words that I was reading out loud, that book I found a couple of years ago, and it was the missionaries at the residential school Holy Angels, that the missionaries, the priests, took words from either the Dene kids or their parents who were across the schoolyard. they would take our creation stories, stories of like giants walking the earth, when they would see white people for the first time, because it really, really, really wasn't that long ago. So they took all of our stories and they took them from Dene to French and then finally translated it to English for publication. And it was published in 1971. And that's around when my mom was born. But actually, I shouldn't have said that. She might get mad at me if I say how old she is. Sorry. So just reading that book, it just felt like, oh man, some of these things should like not be shared, because sometimes thinking again, like you don't have to share everything. But all these images came to my mind just reading those chapters. So for this exhibition, I took different fragments and passages about all those different types of stories, specifically when they saw white people for the first time, just how scared they were, very apocalyptic, very, very, very scary. And so recreating this poem, I really wanted to flip between the genders of the speakers. A lot of it was predominantly men telling their experiences, such as this person. This was a young man who saw Peter Pons, which was a big trapper colonizer that came to Fort McMurray. And I also wanted passages that were told kind of paraphrased from women's perspectives as well. And none of these voices or people, none of their names were recorded in the Book of Dene. It's all anonymous. And so just thinking about that loss of not even ownership, because that's not the right word. There's no acknowledgement, right? So for me, I felt it was important to kind of chop and screw all of this together and flip between the pronouns as well. And so I did that. I wrote that poem and I wrote it in 10 minutes. It really didn't feel like I was writing it. And all those images came to mind. And just working on this exhibition, just thinking about how sometimes it's not necessarily maybe you doing this work. It might be cheesy blood memory kind of style, but it really felt like all of these images were not my own. So the images came to mind after creating the poem, and that's when I started assembling all of the footage. And just the structure of as you walk into the Marvis Francis Gallery, there's 3 videos. I wanted the middle video to be always present with who was watching it. I wanted it to be that present, constant force of as if you're that child watching it across the schoolyard. So you'll notice the video at the middle one is that it's the main constants, and that's where a lot of the fire is. That's where I'm building the fire, where my hands are. And then the left, I thought of the middle as myself and my 2 annoying siblings. I thought, okay, we're here together as foster kids, kind of apocalyptic horror. Isaac, my brother, will be on the left. So when you walk in, he's to the left. And it's all the footage of high up in that masculine energy space that I was taught. And then on the right is my sister, who's lowered to the earth, and she's also a trickster, but she's hardly ever on screen. So I really thought, okay, like this might just be personal to me, but that's how I started editing it, because I've never done a 3-channel video. I needed to make a structure. So I literally labeled it like Isaac, Carrie, Dan, and then my sister saw the editing process. So she's like, what are you doing? This is so weird of you. But it was the only way that I could really understand the different kind of video images, like the voices that were telling this story. And I just thought the mixture of 3 bloods flowing in my veins, I wanted to include, at least to me personally as the artist, my siblings as well. That's basically it, you guys. I don't know. It felt really heady and cerebral, but thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to open it up for questions. I'm going to start with all of you for questions, and if there's nothing that pops up, I'll start asking.
It's not serious enough for a microphone.
Oh, got it.
My question is just who told, like, when did you first hear the story of Big Mary burning down the cabin? Was that like a recent story that you learned about, or was that something that you grew up knowing?
Thank you. Yeah, that was a story told to me by my second cousin Marlene, the one that took me around the res, that she like took me in the middle of the night and kept showing me things. She has this huge book of, she's been collecting all this information for like 4 decades, just like my Auntie Shirley. And she was like, "You want to hear a story?" And she would have almost the story of Big Mary and her life and the genealogy and how we're related. And she just really wanted me to know, like, yeah, Big Mary was here on the earth and she did her own thing. And it was really cool getting to read that. And there's other stories that she shared of Big Mary's life, like seeing in Fort Chip, like a battle at Fort Chip when she was about 5 or 6 years old, coming down from Fort Resolution on the river. So just thinking about, there's just so many stories that are not my stories necessarily to share, but just thinking about coming from that lineage of Big Mary and other incredible women, and of course men too. But yeah, it just like, it felt really important to also bring her into these space when I'm talking about fire, because yeah, she burnt it down. Hmm. Totally. We went right to like the Fort Chip, like the fort too. So we were standing also in the place of like the battle, and I'm just like, I love that extended family you never met want to talk about like scary things in the dark. And to me, that feels very Northern Albertan. Like, don't like whistle at night, like all those kind of things. Like even the Newfoundlanders who live there, like don't whistle, don't talk, don't sing at nights, like close your blinds. They're also super superstitious, even though it's not stition. It's just how it is. So, yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a quick one. I feel like that you talk about your sister Carrie with so much love, and I've heard about Carrie since like the first time we talked, and it really, I feel like, is like it's inspiring, and it makes me feel like I know you, even though, we've slowly been getting to know each other over the few years we've known each other. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about Carrie as an artist, because you mentioned it a few times, and it seems to really influence you and be a big part of your life, beyond Carrie being a big part of your life, but her art also having influence on you.
Yes, Carrie, I think about her all the time. I'm surprised she hasn't called during this artist talk. So that's always nice. Carrie is a fantastic ceramicist herself. She goes to the National Access Art Center called the NAC. It's such a long name, based in Calgary. And she goes every Friday, and she is obsessed. She is obsessed with antlers of all types. And I love that Métis sensibility, also taxidermy. She is right in it. And from ever since she was little, she's been obsessed, and she's been creating out of ceramics. She just really latched on, like just that artist sensibility. She is such a great photographer, collage artist, ceramicist, but she's like, she's okay about it. If she wants, she'll make some more. And I'm like, oh my God, you're so talented. And I just love coming from this lineage of artists, that she's also, as someone who lives with a disability, as someone with FASD, that she can just like launch into it without abandon. Like, she does not care. She will just go for it. So she's been making these ceramic antlers of caribou. She really wants to make a large moose antler set. And she really wants us to collaborate, and for me to give her a show in the gallery that I run, which will, but like maybe another space. So yeah, it's been really great, and I hope to collaborate with her more. Yeah.
Can you just take a second? Yeah, sorry.
You call this project like Little Fires. Could I ask about like your own relationship with fire, and like it seems like you've had like a lot of like sort of big life experiences with fire, but you also call it like healing and sort of like, I guess like like your relationship with fire, I guess, and sort of why you feel kind so inspired by it, I guess.
Thank you for that question. It's such a good question. And I think for me, it also really started as foster care kids, like my brother and I, 18 months apart. There was like a little forest behind our house. And you know what we did? We lit fires in the forest behind our houses for fun. So my relationship to fire starts there with a couple of matches. I was one of the boys, cut off all my hair. We lit fires in the forest, and it was really, really naughty, but really, really fun. So that's where it started. But again, that like, get out of the house. Like, it was the 90s, early 2000s. Like, we didn't have phones. We just came home at dusk and like told each other scary stories. So that's where my relationship to fire started. And just thinking about like often at ceremony, it's like men are like the fire keepers that I've been taught. And just me as a two-spirit person, my relationship to fire feels very masculine and feminine and somewhere in between at the same time. So I feel like my relationship to fire is like always changing, but that's where it started. And just thinking that all of my relatives, the stories that pop up have to do with fire, such as Big Mary and the anonymous people on the reserve burning down as well. I'm like, wow, there's something there. Like, we really like fire. So yeah, that's kind of where it started for me. And I think the title Little Fires came to me thinking about those times in the forest with my brother burning stuff down just for fun, but also that sometimes little fires are okay too. And just that despite the large Fort McMurray fire, I didn't want anyone walking into that space because you're all kind of consenting to this artist talk. You'll hear about the wildfire Fort McMurray one. It can feel so overwhelming looking at those images. But I hope for this exhibition, folks would walk in and it would be more of that comforting, that smaller fire, that you won't even see that much of it. You'll see kind of moments of it too. So there's that active refusal on my part, but also making sure I don't want to re-traumatize anyone. So any of those shots of where the residential school was, they're also fleeting, they're also small. So yeah, that was a great question. Thank you.
Okay, we have one question now, and then I'm gonna say after this, we'll do one more question, and then we're.
Hi, Daniel. I know yesterday at the Two Spirit Tea, you talked a little bit about kind of going into post-secondary and making different choices around post-secondary. And I couldn't remember if you had mentioned going into fine art, but I was curious about, you mentioned that you took to art very early. So I'm curious if there was ever a turning point where you're like, yes, I'm an artist, or if there was like a explosion that happened, or if it has been a slow, gradual thing. And kind of like how you feel about yourself as an artist, and like what, if so, like what were your earliest mediums when you finally had that moment, like, I'm an artist, I'm gonna work with art stuff?
I think too, is the theme in my life is that I've been very naughty as well. Besides playing with fire in high school, I would go to like parties and like not go to school too. But again, like so many of us queer kids, there's that English or art teacher that takes you under their wing. Thank God Jennifer Noseworthy was like, you want to do some art? Come paint a wall with me. So thank God for her, because I really don't know. And she really encouraged me to go to school, which is like connected to the high school in Fort McMurray. I was really lucky to go to Keano College for the 2 years. But as a kid, I was always gravitating, as we all do as artists, like everybody's college entry essay is like, I drew from the moment I was, and it's like, yeah, it's true. It was really true. And my long-term foster care mother, who took most of the photos as well, in my presentation, she always encouraged me because she, and I don't think she would really mind me saying this, is that she really told me, like, don't go support other people. If you want to do something, you really need to go for it. And coming from Fort McMurray and just thinking about her life, she gave her life to so many people. She wanted to be an artist and go to Toronto for art school, but she decided that she did, you know what I mean? So she really encouraged me to go to the arts, which is really rare and like such a privilege. And I got a foster kid bursary to do that. Without that bursary, I really don't know. I wanted to be a teacher maybe. I love kids. So yeah. So maybe I'll go be a teacher one day. I don't know. Yeah. The naughty ones. Who knows?
No? Okay.
I guess my question's just what's next? Do you have any tea brewing, or what's the next fire?
Yeah, I think my next thing would be, and I loved Ali's question yesterday of thinking about like language and language revitalization. I would really love for this poem to be translated back into Dene. I think that would be really important. Also translated to Woodland Cree as well, because in the poem, again, it's like that mixture of three bloods in our veins. But I think my next project, besides a lot of sleep, I think would be working again with my family and spending more time back home in Fort McMurray and Fort Chip. I really want to go, as cheesy as it sounds, like go outside and like paint the forest like plein air style, like with all of the new growth that's coming up. Really collaborate with my family, especially my brother, like recreate more films and kind of see how that goes. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna say thanks everyone for the amazing questions and just being here. It's been like wonderful to get to hear Dan talk, but then also we get to celebrate a little bit right now and just, you know, spend some time with the art. It's warm. I bought popsicles, so please have some popsicles. And Debbie got a bunch of other snacks ready for us while we were here visiting. So just enjoy the evening, and it is the last 2 days of both of these exhibits. So it'll be one of the last chances if you didn't come tomorrow to see Dan's exhibition, but also Candace's beautiful exhibition, which will be visible or viewable as soon as we are done here. So thanks. It is.